What's poppin', programs? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. We're gonna go ahead and explain the ending to Tron Ares and how that ending sets up a potential Tron sequel, one that will hopefully come out before another 15 years passes. So let us go ahead and hit the grid, my nerd babies. And obviously, heavy spoilers ahead for the entirety of Tron Ares. So if you have not seen the movie and don't want spoilers, you may want to do that first and then come back to this video. But if you are wondering whether this movie has any sort of scene during the credits, then I'm just going to tell you guys right now. There is a mid-credit scene that occurs not too long after the credits start rolling, but no post-credit sequence after that, so feel free to leave the movie theater afterwards. But if you have seen this mid-credit scene already, let's go ahead and talk about it, because it sets up the return of a classic Tron character strongly connected to the movie's main antagonist. Alright, so the end of Tron Ares finds a defeated Julian Dillinger, played by Evan Peters, inside his own digital grid after fleeing there when his crimes of corporate espionage and attempted murder are discovered. Julian's obsession with acquiring the permanence code needed to keep his digital constructs active in the real world also leaves his mother, Elizabeth Dillinger, dead on the ground only a few feet away from Julian when the cops find him blue-skidooing himself into his grid to avoid going to prison for the rest of his life. And even though his mother was killed by his cyber soldier Athena against his wishes, Julian knew damn well that his actions were still responsible for her death, with Elizabeth even using her last breaths to blame her son for her demise. The Dillinger grid is of course completely decimated after Eve Kim and the tech wizards at Encom hit Julian Dillinger with the reverse Uno card after Dillinger systems attacked and blew up the Encom grid at the beginning of the film. So, when Julian first arrives inside the Dillinger grid, he is greeted by the sight of his decimated digital world. But he would not get to soak in the empty and devastated landscape for too long when he notices an identity disc rising in the center of the room that he arrived in. However, unlike the identity disc that we have seen on the backs of programs throughout this movie, this disc looks a little different in design, more like the identity discs from the original Tron film. And as I was watching Julian approach this retro red glowing disc, I was like, oh shit, I think that's Commander Sark's identity disc. That tall, skinny motherfucker survived. Somehow, I don't know how. And sure enough, as Julian gets closer to that disc, we can hear the faint whisper of Commander Sark saying his own name before Julian grabs it, causing the energy from the disc to begin taking over his body. And as Julian stands there convulsing like a big ol' idiot, red beams of energy begin to form around him, with the outline of that energy matching Commander Sark's suit from Tron 1982, implying that Julian Dillinger himself has now merged with Commander Sark. But the good news is you can also merge with our new Grid Racer shirt inspired by Tron Ares over at heavyspoilers.shop. It is a sick as hell design of a digital warrior riding on a laser motorcycle from the dang future. And we've also got a pretty dang sexy zombie shirt inspired by the recent Marvel Zombies TV show that you can wear during the Halloween season. And maybe even Thanksgiving if you want to freak out your overly religious relatives. And if you're currently enjoying the Gen V series over on Amazon Prime, then maybe these shirts inspired by Gen V and the boys will have you feeling pretty damn super yourself. We've got all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so stop by today. Now, for those of you who don't know, Commander Sark was played by the late David Warner, who also portrayed Sark's human user, Encom CEO, Edward Dillinger Sr. A big picture of David Warner's Edward Dillinger can be seen in the background of Julian Dillinger's home throughout the film. Warner also provided the voice of that big old face of a master control program who ended up making both Commander Sark and Edward Dillinger his bitches as he sought total world domination. Much like how David Warner played the roles of both a power-hungry CEO and the MCP's enforcer, Evan Peters also plays similar roles in Tron Ares as the grandson of Edward Dillinger, even manifesting as a giant face when communicating with Ares or Athena in the Dillinger grid. So it's poetically fitting for Evan Peters' Julian Dillinger to take on the identity of Commander Sark as well. Now, if you've watched the original Tron, then you will remember how Tron used his identity disc to slice Commander Sark's identity disc in half before taking a chunk out of Commander Sark's melon. And with Sark being the the MCP's very last line of defense, the MCP will try to pull a Hail Mary and give a dying Commander Sark full control over all of its functions, effectively making Sark a powerful extension of his own self. However, Sark would not get to enjoy the power of the MCP for long before Kevin Flynn and Tron destroys the MCP, which is an act that seemingly de-res Sark along with his master. However, with this new mid-credit scene, it seems that Sark's demise has been retconned, as it appears that the late Edward Dillinger Sr. managed to retrieve Sark's code and preserve it in a new identity disk when he started his own independent company. And given how Sark dies in the original Tron, his return could also be easily justified. Because check it out, in Tron, when programs are de-resed, they usually turn into a ball of light before shooting up into the sky, making that signature high-pitched de-resing sound while doing so. And while we do hear that de-resing sound effect when Sark appears to perish in the movie, he merely fades out of view rather than turning into a beam of energy. Even the Master Control program shot up in the sky when it died, so what makes Commander Sark so damn special, huh? Well, the producers of a future Tron movie could easily use this detail to show how Sark wasn't actually fully de-resed like other programs were, allowing Edward Dillinger Sr. to retrieve what was left of Sark's code and store Sark on his own servers after founding Dillinger Systems. However, what exactly could Julian Dillinger's new fusion with Commander Sark mean for a future installment of the Tron franchise? Well, to answer that, I believe that we should look at the motivations of both Julian Dillinger and Commander Sark. Because in Tron Ares, Julian shows a relentless, obsessive need to win and be the best, going so far as to attempt to kill a rival CEO just to be known as the guy who revolutionized warfare forever. On the other hand, Commander Sark is competitive in his own way, regularly fighting other programs in deadly light cycle battles. But he also has absolutely no love for the human users, so much so that he led a grid-wide inquisition hunting down any programs who still believed in the users and forcing those programs to compete to the death if they refused to denounce the users. So, with Julian Dillinger now exposed as the washed-up psycho that he is, and having lost everything, he is bound to resent humanity. Like, this narcissist no longer has the adoration that fueled him. Like, bro straight up wanted to be a god wielding the keys to chaos, and now he's trapped in a hellscape of his own making, hiding from a society that despises him. Now, as an American living in 2025, I've seen my fair share of narcissistic millionaires, and I've learned that when these guys start to feel weak and cornered, they tend to do something drastic to feel powerful again. So I think the most natural step for an insecure Julian after merging with Sark's identity is to flex his dominance by making humanity pay for rejecting him. Because with psycho millionaires, no rarely ever means no, unfortunately. And with this new fusion, I think Julian will adopt Commander Sark's anti-human ideology, seeking domination of the human world through a massive worldwide inquisition after quietly building an army inside of the Dillinger grid. And as we've learned in previous Tron movies, time moves much faster within the grid. So while only a few years may pass in the real world, that could equal hundreds inside of the grid, giving Julian plenty of time to rebuild his devastated server into a staging ground for an assault on humanity. And the longer he waits, the better it is for him. Because as we saw at the end of Tron Ares, CEO Eve Kim and Encom have begun implementing Kevin Flynn's dream of changing the world by digitizing food and medicine for people in need all across the world. And with such a massive breakthrough, human society is about to accelerate technologically in wild, wild ways. Soon, digitizing lasers like the kind at Encom and Dillinger Systems will be absolutely everywhere. And using that technology to make life easier will become commonplace. And much like in the video game Detroit Become Human or iRobot, I think humanity will eventually use this technology to digitize humanoid programs into real life as their servants. And I'm not saying that Encom would do this under Eve Kim's leadership, since she sees programs like Ares as people, but as this technology spreads over the years, independent organizations will use it however they wish. And if there's one thing that humanity loves, it's creating a workforce they don't have to pay or even treat well. My black ass ancestors know all about that. That said, I can see this sarkified Julian Dillinger waiting 5 to 10 years for society to be filled with digitizing lasers and whatnot before using those lasers to spawn his army in the human world. Then with this new army, this sarkified Julian could begin repurposing programs on Earth into his military, giving them the chance to rise up against the users who treat them as less than sentient. Such a thing would reflect Sark's motivations in the first film when he stole other programs for the MCP. And if Julian were to succeed, I could totally see his Sark side forcing humans who don't acknowledge his rule to compete in deadly light cycle and disc war games, specifically in computer-generated arenas digitized into the real world. And I think it would be really cool to see humanity attempt to free itself from this new Commander Sark's oppression. And such a future Tron movie would also be a fantastic opportunity for the Tron entity to be reborn in a similar fashion, since at the end of Tron Legacy, Tron was last seen regaining his identity before disappearing into the sea of simulation after sacrificing himself to save the Flynn family. And while we don't know exactly what happened to Tron after the events of Tron Legacy, if Tron's identity disc were to either be retrieved from the Sea of Simulation or even recreated using a copy of Tron's original programming from Kevin Flynn's computers, theoretically that identity disc could be used to merge the Tron persona onto another program or human being, allowing for Tron to be reborn in a new form, just like Commander Sark was with Julian Dillinger. But honestly, I think Disney should take advantage of Tron actor Bruce Boxleitner still being with us and bring Tron back properly one final time for the next movie. Not having Tron in a Tron film whatsoever doesn't really make all that much sense in my opinion. So having Tron return in one form or another to protect the users would definitely be the right way to go. But at any rate, that's the mid-credit scene explained in a nutshell. But we should definitely still talk about the big Tron Legacy Easter egg that the movie dropped at the very end of the film when it's revealed that Ares traveled to Mexico to live life off of the grid. Because as Ares writes to Eve Kim about his thoughts about humanity and their future, he whips out some photos of Kevin Flynn's son Sam Flynn along with the ISO Cora. After defeating the perfection-obsessed Clue at the end of Tron Legacy, Sam and Cora made their way into the real world, where Sam would preserve his father's identity disc along with all of his important files within a special hard drive that he wore as a necklace around his neck. Then we would see Sam and Cora last as they take a drive across a bridge for Cora to take in the sunrise for the first time in her long-ass life. However, over the course of Tron Ares, we learn that Sam would completely disappear after spending some time as Encom CEO, leaving the company with Eve Kim. And while it's never exactly explained why Sam and Cora decided to completely disappear from society, something tells me that the two decided to do so in order to keep humanity away from two very important things: Kevin Flynn's most important data, along with Cora's super unique and game-changing DNA as an isomorphic algorithm. In Tron Legacy, we saw how crucial Kevin Flynn's data disk was for allowing programs to cross the barrier between the digital and human world. So, Sam Flynn taking his father's identity disk with him during his self-imposed exile in order to keep the programs of his father's grid from escaping into the real world seems like the super responsible thing to do. And not only that, but it's also very much reflective of his father Kevin Flynn's own isolated, self-sacrificial lifestyle that he evolved into during his own self-imposed exile in the grid in Tron Legacy. Because much like his father went into hiding to keep his disc from Clue, the would-be conqueror, I'm willing to bet that Sam did the same to keep his father's data and legacy from falling into the wrong hands, especially the grubby hands of the Dillingers who love to mooch off of Kevin Flynn's discoveries and inventions for their own gain, regardless of how many people suffer in the process. But speaking of the Dillingers, in the Tron Legacy Blu-ray, we learn of a secret conversation between what appears to be Cillian Murphy's Edward Dillinger Jr. and a Master Control 751 that is given the voice of the MCP itself. Take a listen.
Yes. Will this be a problem? not be his father, but he's still a Flynn. Don't underestimate him. End of line.
But what's particularly interesting here is how Edward Dillinger refers to this Master Control 751 as his father, despite the audience hearing the voice of the MCP. And while I was hoping for Tron Ares to follow this bonus scene up in a clear and meaningful way, that never happened. However, there is a chance that a Tron Ares sequel could connect the Sark identity disk that Julian finds to this very same mysterious Master Control 751 figure that Julian's uncle Eddie Jr. believed was his father. I mean, revealing that it was Commander Sark himself who was manipulating Edward Dillinger Jr. to keep tabs on Sam Flynn would make a lot of sense, especially considering how Commander Sark was modeled off of Edward Dillinger Sr. and was given the powers of the MCP at the end of Tron 1982. So if this is the case, this would also be a pretty good reason for Sam Flynn to leave the Encom company behind and go ghost. Because after Sam left the company in Alan Bradley's hands at the end of Tron Legacy, Alan Bradley would elect to keep Cillian Murphy's Edward Dillinger Jr. as part of the Encom board. So if Sam Flynn learned that Edward Dillinger Jr. was spying on him while working with a rogue program to plot his demise, it would make sense for Sam to take all of his father's data and get the hell out of Dodge. But anyways, like I alluded to earlier, another reason why Sam and Cora may have disappeared was because of Cora herself, specifically her special DNA as an ISO. In Tron Legacy, we learned from Kevin Flynn how the ISOs were randomly created by the grid itself with a different kind of free will and potential that was unlike any other program that he created himself. Not only this, but we also learned that ISOs have a unique ability to regenerate lost limbs when Kevin Flynn opens up Cora's special triple helix DNA code to heal her.
But didn't you write it?
Some of it. The rest of it is just beyond me.
She's an ISO.
Yeah, the last ISO.
All this time you were just protecting her.
She's the miracle man. Everything I ever worked for. A digital frontier to reshape the human condition.
So just like Kevin Flynn went into hiding in part to protect Cora from Clue, I would not be surprised if Sam Flynn took Cora off of the grid in order to protect her from being poked and prodded by curious scientists around the world that wish to unlock the potential to evolve humankind through Cora's highly advanced DNA. Compared to the average human, Cora is basically a god walking among men, just like the Greek goddess Cora, C-O-R-A, that she appears to be named after. So if humanity ever got word that the key to upgrading themselves into godlike beings with much longer lifespans lied within Cora's DNA, then douchebags like Dillinger would be more than willing to sacrifice Cora to make that reality happen. But anyways, yeah, Ares seems to be seeking out Cora in particular in order to not only connect with another program in the real world just like him, but to also understand what exactly makes a program like her so special in the first place. And making a connection like Cora is especially important for Ares, considering that regular humans appear to have a much shorter lifespan than programs like him and Cora do. And while they are both not immortal by any means, a lack of man-made flesh gives them the potential to live for hundreds of years, if they're not, killed. So I can imagine that having a friend that can survive as long as he does would be important to Ares as he travels around the world in his Ducati motorcycle, the same type of bike that Sam and his dad whipped around in Tron Legacy. But speaking of immortality, I am curious to see if a Tron sequel will ever dive into the concept of humans attempting to bring digital copies of their dead loved ones to life using Kevin Flynn's technology. I mean, Encom CEO Eve Kim herself suffered deeply with the loss of her sister Tess. So maybe that grief could eventually push Eve to trying to recreate Tess digitally before printing her out with a digitizing laser. I mean, it wouldn't be the real thing, obviously, but maybe these clones would be real enough to help people get over their grief. I don't know. it would definitely be a fun thing to explore for Eve Kim's character if she were to return for a sequel. But anyways, that is it for this ending explained for Tron Ares. Let us know what you guys thought of the movie in the comment section down below. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button and maybe even hitting that like button if you guys enjoy the video. But like always, I've been MT, you programs have been amazing, and I'll catch you programs later. Bye.